On our lead story this hour, U.S. President Donald Trump will receive a hero's welcome in Israel's parliament this morning as fragile Gaza ceasefire that he helped to broker enters a fourth day, with the expected release of Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners marking tentative steps in a conflict that long resistance to resolution. But we cross now to SABC News Correspondent in Tel Aviv in Israel, Blake Sifton, for more. Blake, good morning. So it is quite a seminal moment over the past 2 years, and I think many people want to know at this point, what do we know for sure in terms of the hostage deal, the exchange as part of the broader plan, and do we know what the logistic measures are that are currently in place?
Good morning. The latest we have is that the Israeli military have confirmed that the Red Cross are currently on their way to receive the first group of living Israeli hostages who will be released this morning. That's 6 hostages. They will be released in northern Gaza. The rest of the 20 living hostages will follow in other releases later this morning in other locations in Gaza. Now, the hostages will be handed over to the Red Cross by Hamas. The Red Cross will then bring them to Israeli forces in Gaza. Those forces will bring them to an Israeli military base just across the border in Israel. There they will have initial medical checks, and they will reunite with their families. And from there, they will go to one of 3 specially designated hospitals in the Tel Aviv region. Now, what's different than previous hostage releases is that Hamas have been told and have agreed, according to the negotiations, not to hold handover ceremonies when they give them to the Red Cross, not to make a spectacle of the situation, and not to televise it. That was apparently a major demand of the Israeli government during the negotiations. Now, when it comes to the deceased hostages, of which there are expected to be 28, we understand that some will be returned to Israel later today. However, the rest is expected to take time. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff reportedly told hostage families that many of the deceased hostages, it will be hard to locate them, and that international teams will be tasked with trying to find them. Now, once the hostages have been released, we understand then Israel will begin releasing the Palestinian prisoners. That includes 1,700 Palestinians who were detained in Gaza throughout the 2 years of this war. They include a number of children. And then, of course, there's the 250 so-called security prisoners. These are prisoners serving life sentences in Israeli jails. Hamas was pushing for the release of some of the highest profile prisoners, including Fatah leader Marwan Barghouti. And while there are still negotiations going on about the identities of some of these hostages, we understand that Israel is not releasing any of the highest profile prisoners. The prisoners that are being released have already been taken to one prison in the West Bank and another prison in southern Israel ahead of their release. And we understand that of the 250, 100 will be released into the West Bank, 15 into East Jerusalem, and of 135, some will be sent into Gaza and others will be sent into exile abroad.
Blake, we also know, of course, that U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to arrive in Israel this morning and to address the Knesset. You know, what is the talk around that, and what is the status of Benjamin Netanyahu's popularity in Israel at this point?
So that's right. President Trump is expected to land in Israel in about an hour and 10 minutes from now. He'll be met at the airport in a red carpet ceremony by Prime Minister Netanyahu as well as President Herzog. He'll then go to Jerusalem to meet the family members of some hostages and will then address the Knesset. Now, this is all something of a victory tour for President Trump. He's wildly popular in Israel at the moment, especially among the family members of the hostages and their supporters. They were calling for him to win the Nobel Peace Prize, and of course they were disappointed when he didn't. Now, when Trump addresses the Knesset, he will be only the 4th American president to ever address Israel's parliament, the first in 17 years since George W. Bush did it. He'll almost certainly receive a standing ovation, a long-standing ovation, but he'll be less popular amongst Prime Minister Netanyahu's far-right coalition partners. They are very much against much of this deal, including the idea of pathways to a Palestinian state, the idea that the Palestinian Authority can play a role in governing Gaza. And they have also advocated that once the hostages are released, that if Hamas is not totally dismantled, that Israel should go back to war. And President Trump has, of course, provided guarantees that that won't happen. He has said definitively that the war is over. Now, when it comes to Prime Minister Netanyahu's popularity, he's certainly receiving a boost from this news, the release of these hostages, but he's been widely criticized by many in Israel for many things, but partly for not taking responsibility for the failures that led to the October 7th attacks. A recent poll suggested that some 64% of Israelis think that he should accept responsibility and resign. Now, again, the far right that he depends on for the survival of his government, they are very much opposed to much of this deal. And they have threatened that if Hamas is not dismantled and that if Israel does not go back to war, that they could leave his coalition government and collapse it. Other parties have said that if that were to happen, they would step in, prop up the government in order to allow for the rest of this deal, the much more complicated and difficult and ambitious parts of this deal, to truly reach a peaceful solution. Netanyahu is receiving something of a boost from the release of the hostages, but this is still a very deeply divided country, and his political future is uncertain.
Just a final question, Blake. Has there been any guarantee by Prime Minister Netanyahu that the war is over?
In short, no. Recently, he said, a few days ago, he said that Hamas will be disarmed and that Gaza will be demilitarized. He said that could happen the easy way, by which he meant through the negotiations that are meant to happen into the second phase of this deal, according to the deal that's been agreed to in principle by both sides and pushed by President Trump. But he also said that it could happen the hard way. And by that, he was implying the suggestion that Israel could go back to war, that Israel could try to militarily destroy Hamas. But that would certainly put him at odds with the United States. President Trump has repeatedly said, as recently as before he took off for his flight to Israel, that the war is over. And the only reason Hamas agreed to this deal, agreed to give up all of the hostages and essentially give up their leverage, was that they were confident and they were assured by mediators Qatar, Egypt, and another important country in Turkey that the United States would provide this guarantee and that they would compel Israel to honor its obligations and not return to war.
Blake Sifton, thanks so much for that update. Of course, we'll be checking in with Blake again later on, as he said, just over an hour before United States President Donald Trump is expected to touch down in Israel.